Thank you for joining today's presentation entitled An Exclusive Funders Webinar, the U.S. Mexico Data Portal. My name is Maria Laura Munoz and I am the Mexico representative for the BPP. Before we get started, I want to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's session. I've taken a screenshot here to show you an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You have joined today's webinar listening through your computer's speaker system by default. This means if you can hear the music through your computer, you will be able to hear the presentation. If you would like to call in using the phone, just locate your audio pane and select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code will then be displayed. You also have the ability to ask questions in either English or Spanish using your questions pane. Simply type in your question and click Send. At the end of the presentation, we will do a Q&A session and take as many questions as we have time for. Also, the recorded version of this webinar will be made available to you as soon as possible. Let's get started by introducing today's panelists. Amanda Dillon is Manager of Strategic Philanthropy for the Foundation Center and coordinates the development, implementation, and communication of knowledge services projects for grant makers, including research analysis and data visualization tools. Andy Carey is Executive Director of the U.S. Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership. Welcome, Amanda and Andy. I'll turn the control over to Amanda so she can start with today's presentation.
Great. Thank you, Malora. Thank you so much for having me today here. My name is Amanda Dillon. As Malora introduced me, I've been working at Foundation Center for just about 4 years now, and I started out at Foundation Center working in finance, administration, and development, and for the past 2 years I've been working in the Department of Strategic Philanthropy. I've also been a part of the Foundation Maps launch team, and more recently I've been working closely with foundations and different membership groups on customizing foundation maps for the issues that they care about. So I'm very happy to be here today to talk a little bit more about how we might do this for the Border Philanthropy Partnership. So the project specifically that I'm here today to discuss and talk about building is the first ever portal to document philanthropy in a shared region where a developed country and a developing one meet. This portal will increase the availability, accuracy, and transparency of information regarding the philanthropic sector along the U.S. Mexico border region. We'll also identify trends in donations and donor institutions in order to improve our understanding of resource distribution. It will also enable nonprofit and philanthropic sector leaders to map data with a regional and binational focus, both in English and Spanish, and it will show data sets for the 10 border states with a choice of several demographic, socioeconomic, and other data sets to create compelling visual portraits showing where philanthropy has made an impact and also where opportunities exist to fill critical needs. So in essence, this tool will connect donors to the causes and the communities that they care about in this binational border region. And it will be made available to the public and will be designed for grant makers, nonprofit organizations, advisors, policymakers, researchers, and others interested in the impact of philanthropy and collaboration opportunities in the U.S. Mexico border region. So I thought we could start a little bit more generally and talk about foundation maps, which is what the portal will be built on. So for those of you on the call who don't know or who aren't already subscribers to Foundation Maps, it's a data visualization tool designed for philanthropy. It's used by grants management and program staff at foundations. It's used by nonprofits, researchers, and consultants, and it helps them find and visualize information about our sector. So, for example, you can use it to do things like scan the landscape of funding. You can also see who is funding what and where. You might use it to identify gaps in funding, or you could use it to reveal sector trends. So what we're looking at on screen right now is the Foundation Maps professional subscription. And before we dig into a few examples, I just wanted to give everyone an overview of the interface, and mainly the navigational menus you see on the left and at the top of your screen. So using the navigation on the left, you can essentially change the visualization of data you see in the middle of the screen. So right now, as you can see, the map visualization is selected. And you also have the option of showing the data in a list view, or you can create an advanced search for your data, or you might view the data in a trend chart format so that you can compare funding using bar charts and line charts. There's also a tool we have called Pathways, and it's kind of like a 6 degrees of separation tool that shows the connections between and among funders and grantees. There's also a constellations tool, which is network mapping, and I'll be showing you more of that today. And then there's also an option to save your searches. At the top, I just want to explain the filters briefly. So here you can select basically how to show the grants on the map. So you can select to show them by where the recipient is located, who's receiving the grants. You can show data by where the foundation is located, or you can also show the data by where the area is served by the grant. And on screen right now, we're seeing the data mapped. The red bubbles represent recipient locations, and they represent all the 370,000 recipients who are receiving funding in our database right now, and where they're located. The one thing I want to note is you're currently looking at our subscription version of Foundation Maps. So the version that we would have for the Border Philanthropy Partnership would be customized and would be a custom data set. And then additionally, the More Filters menu on the right-hand side allows you to look at information like population served by the grant, or type of support, or keyword search, or grant maker type. So it allows you to refine the data even further. So today I'm going to show you more specifically how Foundation Maps can be utilized by Border Philanthropy Partnership and its cohort of funders. And as I said, the site will be customized using the Foundation Maps platform, but it would automatically default to the border region, and all of the data in it would be border specific. So let's say, for example, you're interested in identifying where funding is most needed in relation to a specific geographic area. So we're going to get started by looking at Mexico. And so you would type Mexico into the location bar there, and then you would select it. And you can see that the map zooms to focus on recipients located in Mexico. And you can also see that the 4 summary boxes at the top of the map have changed, and now they reflect funding information for specifically Mexico. And this grants set shows grants starting in 2006. You also have the ability to toggle between, as I said before, recipients and foundations. So when I select foundations, you can see the blue dots represent where foundations are located in Mexico. And finally, you can also search by area served of the grant. And when looking at area served data, what you see is that grants that are specifically designated to serve a particular geography. And so what I mean by when I say this is that the recipients could be located anywhere. The funder could be located anywhere. So the fund located in Europe, the recipient could be located in Canada, but what we're mapping here is that the work of the grant is actually happening in Mexico. And so you'll notice that this view can be different than just looking at the data based on recipient location. So just look at how the total number of recipients changes. I'm going to switch it back to recipients based and located in Mexico. And again, grants that are serving Mexico. So you can see possible NGOs that aren't based in Mexico but that are working there. So before I continue adding more filters, I just wanted to pause here so we can take a look at the distribution of grants in Mexico. So as you can see, the part of Mexico that is near Mexico City has quite a concentration of grants, whereas northern Mexico and the border region has less funding activity. And of the border region, it appears upper Baja California and the area above Monterrey and near Nuevo Laredo and Matamoros has grants, more grants than those other parts. So really quickly, you're able to get a big picture view of Mexico's funding landscape by looking at this map. And so now say we do want to refine our search further and only focus on funding that supports employment services to see how funding toward that issue area compares to overall funding in Mexico. So we're going to type in services into the subject box, and you can see again that after applying that criteria, the summary boxes have changed to reflect the new funding totals. And when we pause here and think about how the distribution of funding for employment compares to overall funding going toward Mexico, we can see that there's a lot less of it overall. But again, the lack of funding in northern Mexico and by the border is consistent. And what's interesting when I looked at this was that it appears that no funding is showing up on the Mexico side near Baja California when just looking at employment-related grants. So instead, we can see that we have data on employment funding near the border by El Paso and by Piedras Negras and Del Rio. So now let's take a look and view the funding, what the funding looks like on the other side of the border. And because this is standard foundation maps and this is just a view of the subscription tool and it's not customized, we unfortunately can't see both sides of the border at the same time. However, one of the benefits of undertaking this project with BPP would be to allow us to see data on both sides of the border at the same time. So in this case, we're just going to look at funding around California and Texas's borders with Mexico. So for the United States, in this subscription version of Foundation Maps, we can look at funding by county. And so that you can see my criteria is employment again. And in this view, instead of bubbles, you can see that we can visualize the data using what is, in one sense, a heat map. So you can see that San Diego County has more funding for employment than Imperial County next door because it's shaded darker. But you can also see compared to Los Angeles County to the north, it's less. And if you wanted to drill down into the data and see exactly which funders were giving to who in San Diego, you could click on foundations, recipients, or grants here and really drill down. So now let's take a look at the funding landscape in Texas, again for employment. So again, this is pretty fascinating because we're looking at employment funding distribution by county, and this visualization, again, serves as a heat map. So it's clear that the concentration of employment funding for Mexico along the border is going to just mainly 3 counties, to El Paso County, to Hidalgo County, and to Cameron County. And again, one of the most helpful things about this tool is that it really allows you to quickly get a big picture view of the funding landscape. So now I want to back up a little bit and look more closely at that grants data that was serving Mexico for employment. So I'm going to pull up a list view of this information, and we have 3 tabs of lists to select from here. So we can take a look at this list by foundations who have given to causes in Mexico by most grant dollars. And as you look at this list, you may see a few familiar names, but perhaps there's a few names that may be surprising to see pop up on this list. And one thing I want to note here that's really important is that the data that you're seeing here reflects the data that Foundation Center has collected from tax forms that foundations have to submit to the IRS in the United States. And we also have information from foundations who electronically submit their grants data to us. So if you know that you're a top funder or make a grant for employment services in Mexico and you don't see your name in this list of top 10 foundations, it's probably just because we don't have your data yet. But with this project, we would like to make sure to collect all of the grants data from all the funders supporting the border region. So I'm going to switch it to the Recipients tab, and again you can see that the list may have some names you recognize, and it may have some names that surprise you. And then finally, we can click to the Grants tab to see a full list of employment grants given to recipients in Mexico between, in this case, 2006 to present. And this view can be helpful if you're trying to do a quick scan because it says the funder name, recipient name, year of the grant, and dollar value of the grant. And one thing I would say is that while this platform is an excellent tool for scanning the landscape and looking at funding data broadly, it actually also provides you the ability to drill down into the details if you want to get more nuanced with what you're looking at. So if we click on the green icon in the column that says Details, we can pull up this grant description, and in this grant description, as you can see, we have information about the amount of the grant, the year awarded, the duration. We have more details like who was the population served, what was the geographic area served specifically, and then we also get a grant description, which at times can be pretty robust and pretty specific. And then one thing I want to point out is that in the top right corner of this grant description, you'll see this e-grant icon. And this indicates that this piece of grants data has been submitted to us electronically by the Ford Foundation. And we currently, Foundation Center currently has over 1,000 foundations across the world who are submitting their grants to us electronically. And this allows us to have more real-time and accurate data. So we encourage as many foundations to do this. And as you can see with this grant, it was awarded in 2015, so it's very, very recent. Beyond looking, at the grant description, one other way that you can gather even more data about the foundation is by clicking the foundation's name. And so when I do that, their grant maker profile pops up. And what you can see by looking at their grant maker profile is basic information, so their address, telephone number, website. We also have financial data, basic financial data. We have information on their mission statement, a little bit of background information on the foundation, and then their grant making programs. And we get a lot of this information either from their website or from what they've let us know they want to be shown on this profile. So this is another great tool just to learn more about new foundations who you may be less familiar with, or even the ones that you do know that you want to get more acquainted with. And so you can also see all of their grants by clicking on the Grants tab there. Or you can click on the Subjects tab, which is what I'm going to show you next, and that will show their grant making distributed across various subject areas. So the name for this visualization that you're seeing here, we call it a windrose chart, and it's essentially a circular bar chart. But what it shows you is a breakdown of the foundation's giving by number of grants across several different issue areas. And it appears like in Ford's case, the most grants fall into the human rights category, followed by community and economic development. And this is according to Foundation Center's taxonomy. So if you toggle from count summary to summary amount, what you'll see is the data sorted by dollar amount. So in the previous view, you were looking at number of grants, and in this view, you're looking at dollar amount. And you can see how this can change as well. And right here, I specified the year to be 2006. And this is just a PowerPoint presentation, but on the actual Foundation Maps platform, there's this play button that appears, and you can click it, and what happens is that the visualization is animated, and you can see how the funding has changed over time. And this can be really useful because it might help you identify if a funder is new to a particular funding area, or if they've been a long-time supporter of a particular funding area. So maybe you see, human rights consistently across the years. Or it might also tell you if a foundation is moving away from funding a particular priority area. And all of this information is based on grants data, so it can really reveal what a foundation cares about based on their activities and grant making. And sometimes this can be pretty interesting compared to what's on their website or what they're stating they're interested in. And one final thing about this visualization before I move on is that lots of foundations and membership networks that we work with, they tell us that they actually print this visualization out or use it in PowerPoints for presentations with other team members or for their board, or sometimes they'll add it in reports or share it with their colleagues to let them know, where they're working. And there's a very easy PDF export option there that allows them to do that. So now you've seen how you can use this tool to, broadly scan the landscape of funding geographically, and I've shown you how you can find out more details about individual foundations and the history of their funding. But now I'm going to go even one step further and show you how to see the network of funding around a particular issue area. And this provides users another way to essentially scan the landscape, but to do it more so based off of funding relationships. So what you're looking at on screen now is something called constellations, which, as I mentioned earlier on, is a data visualization tool that shows network mapping. And so on screen you can see the red bubbles represent recipients and the turquoise bubbles represent foundations. And one of the things that constellations can show you is how tight or how loose a particular network is. So you can see the criteria from above. We're looking at grants for activities based in Mexico from 2006 to present. And so you can quickly see who's connected to who has more links than others, and it can show you who's closer to the center of this funding universe versus who's more on the periphery. And one note I'll make is that the data on screen is visualizing the top 300 connections of over 20,000 connections. And so the organizations you see on screen with this criteria doesn't show every single foundation and recipient funding Mexico, but just the top 300 based on dollar value. But if you wanted to see additional organizations, it would simply be a matter of adding additional filtering like subject area or any of those other filters like population served that I was talking about earlier. So oftentimes we hear from foundations that they want to know who all the players are in a particular funding region, and they want to know how they're all connected. And this can sometimes be motivated by the desire for them to look for new funding partners, or potentially to help them find new recipients to fund, or even perhaps more generally just to get a better understanding of all of the relationships out there. Sometimes funders have let us know that they've used this to confirm certain assumptions that they had about a funding landscape. In one case, I remember speaking to a funder who was confident that she knew all of the important funders and recipients in a particular community, and we showed her this tool based off of the data, and she discovered several organizations that she didn't even know about. So this can help you basically validate and back up what you think is happening in a particular funding landscape. And in constellations, you can also highlight certain organizations to really see how they're connected in the universe and where those connections are. You can also click any of the bubbles to pull up more information about that organization's funding. And one thing I'll add here is if you look under Fundación Banorte, it says very central to this network. So using algorithms behind the data, basically the machine has determined that this foundation is very well connected in grant making in Mexico. And just for the sake of comparing two different funding network maps, I wanted to show a visualization of grant activities in New Mexico in support of people of Latin American descent. So here's that visualization. And what I immediately see with this network map is that it's a fairly tight-knit community compared to what we saw before. You can see that the connections between each organization are closer. Many foundations fund organizations that other foundations are funding, and from an analytical perspective, this appears to be a strong network because it is very kind of intertwined. And when we get through the rest of these slides, I'd be happy to demo this tool live because it is a bit more interactive when you're actually playing on the platform. And I actually mapped out several of the organizations that you all represent. So it might be interesting to show you all really how you are connected and which recipients and grantees you have in common. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to look at the map again, but we're going to look at the geography of a U.S. border state like Arizona. And again, I want to get a little bit more specific and just focus on employment services and community and economic development. So again, notice the 4-box summary shows that grants going to recipients in Arizona for employment amount to roughly $61 million made by 179 funders to 248 recipients. And so let's add some additional context to this map. As I was explaining before, one of the features that we really want to build out and customize for the Border Philanthropy Partnership platform is to build in demographics. And right now in Foundation Maps, in the tool that we currently have, we only have demographic information for the United States. But through building this project, we hope to show demographic data for Mexico as well. So I'm going to start us by looking at Phoenix more closely and looking at demographic data for per capita income. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit further because the demographic data overlays that we have actually go all the way down to the census block level. And so at the zoom level, you can really see where the grant recipients are located in comparison to how the demographics are for that geography. And so you can see how they correspond. And in this case, you can see that there's nonprofits located in several impoverished neighborhoods, but there's also several, areas of low per capita income that maybe more nonprofits could, start to fill those spaces. And just I maybe didn't explain this, but the darker the area, the higher the percentage. So the dark purple represents high per capita income, and the light blue represents low per capita income. And so let's keep looking at this same area, and I'm going to switch the toggle so we're looking at Hispanic demographics. And so this is what percentage of the population has Hispanic origin. And we can see, I pulled up the legend here on the left, so you can see the darker the color, the higher the concentration. And it's clear that the higher the percent of Hispanic population corresponds pretty well with the lower per capita income around Phoenix. And I would love to show the same example, as I said, for Mexico with Mexican demographic indicators, but in this version of Foundation Maps, which is the subscription version, we don't have that information yet. But as I said, building this custom platform would enable us to bring that data and functionality onto the map. So that concludes most of my presentation, but before I open it up for questions and switch it back over to Malaura and Andy, I just thought it might be helpful to share with you all a little bit about what other foundations and networks have said the benefits of having a tool like this have been for them. And I won't disclose exact organizations, but we've worked with one very well-established affinity group that has a customized map, and it's let us know that their members find the data completely invaluable in their research efforts. They really see it as this go-to and authoritative resource for information about funding flows for their particular issue area. So one example that a foundation gave for how they use it is they said they're able to better understand the big picture of human rights funding and its areas of concentration, and that has helped them inform the design of their new human rights funding structures and strategies. Another foundation said that it helped them move beyond their usual allies in collaborating with other funders because it helped them better understand funding flows to different emerging economies, and it helped them reflect on sector-wide challenges beyond the issues that they were directly supporting. Another foundation said that they use this visualization tool to share evidence with their board that's really based on facts and statistics. And finally, a funder said that they truly use it to understand the funding landscape and that this data before this platform wasn't available anywhere else, and that they will continue to use the data to conduct their own analysis to help strengthen their own collaborations addressing the issue that they care about, and also to advocate for additional funding to address this gap. So, as you can see from the foundations who are really making use of this tool, they've found it completely game-changing for their work. This is the first tool of its kind that has this focus, as I stated at the beginning, on a border of a developed country and a developing country that, in a bilingual format, that it can really change the game for funding for this region. So I'm happy to open it up to questions that the audience may have, and I'm happy to try any additional examples using the live version of Foundation Maps.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes, there are some questions. The first one is, how often will the data be updated?
So our data gets updated actually weekly. We put new data into Foundation Maps weekly, and as I said, the data that we collect comes from a variety of sources. So we collect some of it off of 990 forms that are submitted to the IRS in the United States, and then there's over 1,000 foundations who are submitting their grants to us electronically, and that happens anywhere from being on an annual basis to a quarterly basis to a biannual basis to, I think some foundations even submit it every 2 months. And actually, we're really excited here at Foundation Center because we just developed some new technology in-house that's going to allow us to classify and code grants a lot faster than we've ever been able to do before. And so we expect to be adding about 1 million grants a year to all of our products.
Thank you, Amanda. Another question. What data sets will the portal showcase?
Which data sets?
Yes.
The main data set would be showing basically foundations that are giving to nonprofits or NGOs that are focused on the border region. We would also show data for foundations that are located around the border region. We would also show data for recipients located around the border region. And so, as I said, this would be on both sides, on the United States side and on the Mexico side. In addition to that kind of grant information, we would overlay these various socioeconomic and demographic overlays, and I believe we're still in conversation about what those exact data sets would be, but we have an idea that it would be some similar to, per capita income, median household income on both sides, but like I said, we're still finalizing those details.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. One last question. Will the portal be able to display information from both the U.S. and Mexico at the same time? For example, show a map for Ciudad Juárez, El Paso, and Las Cruces?
Yes, so exactly. That's one of the things that building this platform will enable us to do, which we can't currently do. So that will be, a huge innovation to the platform, and we believe that especially showing something like area served, that will really give us a better sense of whether the funding is being concentrated more on one side versus the other. And if there's no, I welcome additional questions, but if there's none in meantime, I just wanted to actually show one visualization that I created right before we got started, which was mapping out, as I said, several foundations who registered, several organizations that registered for this webinar. So I mapped several of them out, and it's really interesting to see. Here's the constellation network map, and so you can see, which of your foundations have recipients that you're both funding, or you can see, for example, some of you are funding recipients that no one else in this cohort is funding. So this is one of the, possible benefits of using a tool like this, is to really get this information that otherwise would be so difficult to analyze and determine. Are there any other questions? Or does anyone want me to do any examples of a particular area they're interested in seeing data on?
Oh yes, there's one more question. Do you know of other binational experiences, and what are some of the best practices?
I guess I would need a little bit more context for that question. Is the question about grant making in particular, or about sharing data?
About sharing data in another region.
Some of the things we've seen with internationally based foundations is that they find that by submitting their data to us electronically, they're really able to communicate about their work in a, in a place that they might not be represented otherwise.
Somebody from Sonora is requesting an example for the state of Sonora in Mexico, Amanda.
Oh, okay. Again, I just want to preface this by saying, one of our goals with this project is really to make this data set a lot more robust. So I'm not sure how much information we'll actually be able to pull up for Sonora, but here you can see that we have grants for that are about 21.5 million, and this is just going to recipients located in this region. So again, if I were to switch it to area served, I think this number would increase. So yeah, so you can see that there's actually about $30 million of records of grants that we have starting in 2006 until present, made by 111 funders to 242 recipients. So as I was saying before, we can drill down and look specifically, at who these players are. So these are the top funders that come up. So some of these may be familiar to some of you. Here's a couple that I know are on the call today. So you're coming up as top funders. In terms of the recipient list, these are some of the top recipients. And if you want to drill down and see, well, what are these, what are these grants for? You can click on the details icon, and sometimes the grants have more or less data. Go back and look at, for example, these grants. Let's see, there might be some more about what the grant was made for. So it can really depend. Yeah, these aren't coming up with too many grant descriptions. Here's one, for example, Kellogg made to Fondo para la Paz, and this was to provide fresh water for residents and by constructing 400 rain catchment reservoirs. And so again, you can see this grant was reported to us electronically by the Kellogg Foundation. Are there any more questions, or does anyone else want me to try another geography search?
Could you try the state of Chihuahua?
So this is specifically for the city. So here, that's the city. So you can see we have grants data for the city, but then we can also look at the state of Chihuahua. And so you can see we have grants information on over $23 million worth in grants. And we can take a look again at the top list of foundations. And again, we can look at the list of recipients. So I think I see some organizations who I think are on the call, or at least who registered for the call, coming up on this list. And then again, you can always, like I said, visualize this using the constellations tool. And so this will allow you to see how linked you are. So this is an interesting network because it appears that those who fund in Chihuahua are pretty well connected. This is a pretty tight-knit network in that several organizations are in the middle and several organizations are funded by others who are funding. It's not as siloed as some of these maps that we see.
Amanda, there's a question. What are the plans to make information from the Mexican border region more robust and updated?
So one of the biggest efforts in this project would be to reach out to foundations that we know are working in this area and reach out to them and ask them to submit their grants to us electronically. We would also, work with a partner like Border Philanthropy Partnership to make sure that they're helping us, since they're really the experts in this subject area. But we could, customize this in a way so that it is focusing on really the issues that this region cares about, and we can update that, as time goes along, if it moves or if it varies. Are there any other questions or requests to see data?
There's a question about, is it possible to chart 2 or 3 or 4 states at the same time? For instance, Arizona and Sonora? I think you already addressed that question, but go ahead, Amanda, if you want to say something about it.
Yeah. So at this point, unfortunately, our platform is not built to do that yet, but as part of this project, because it is a custom map, we would build in that functionality so that we could look more closely at funding data in several different geographies. But at this point, I can't unfortunately show you that. But as a result of building this project, we would be able to see that on the map.
Okay, one last request. Can you show the state of Sinaloa, although it's not a border state?
Okay, so here's the data on Sinaloa, and again, over 100 funders funding 168 recipients for almost $15 million. Again, we will drill down and look more closely at the top funders here. So what's interesting to me about this list is that, in some of the other more border geographies that we've looked at, there's been more a mix of foundations originating in the United States and in Mexico, where only 1, 2, 3 of the top 10 foundations giving toward Sinaloa are based in the United States. So this is a region that's heavily funded by Mexican foundations. Again, here's the recipient list. And so here's, for example, an organization that is not based in Mexico, but that's one of the top recipients because they work in that region. But as you can see, the rest of the recipients are actually based in Mexico in these various cities. So for example, here's a case in which, while these are based in Mexico, they're not based in Sinaloa, but they're working in that geography. Also like this NGO here.
Amanda, I think that is the last question we have time for. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Andy Carey, BPP's Executive Director.
Thank you, Amanda, for your wonderful presentation. We appreciate the collaboration with Foundation Center to see this project to completion. On behalf of the U.S. Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership, we thank all of our attendees for participating today. As many of you know, the Border Philanthropy Partnership supports a network of organizations that build prosperity through leadership, collaboration, and philanthropy in the U.S. Mexico border. The Border Data Portal is an exciting project and one we believe is transformational to increase philanthropy and more specifically charitable giving in the binational region. Why are we doing this project? The border region is vibrant and dynamic and has unlimited opportunities for community growth and development. Families, communities, and economies on both sides of the border are inextricably linked to one another. We're bilingual, bicultural, and binational. We live and work on both sides of the border. The border region's population is young and growing and is projected to increase by more than 25 million people in the coming decades. Despite the growing opportunities for success, many daunting challenges face us at every turn, including but not limited to infectious disease, obesity, and cardiovascular disease, threats to our shared natural environment, vulnerable regional economies, high poverty rates, and disenfranchised youth all threaten the vitality of communities on both sides of the international boundary. The needs of low to moderate income families continue to evolve, particularly in the economically distressed U.S. Mexico border region. According to the U.S. Mexico Border Counties Coalition, there are significantly high rates of vulnerable families and children. 43.2% of the total population living in poverty is between 0 to 17 years of age. The poverty rate of Latino children living along the border, 37%, is twice the national rate, 17%. If the 10 states, Mexican and American, comprising the border region were America's 51st state, it would rank at or near the bottom in nearly all measures of prosperity, community health, educational opportunity, and quality of life. As we look to the Border Data Portal is an innovative technological solution to increase grant making and improve grant seeking for philanthropic and nonprofit partners that are interested in the health and well-being of border region families and communities. We need your help. Today we invite you to partner with us in funding the Border Data Portal. The project is well underway and will build off of the foundation mapping software of Foundation Center. The projected timeline start to finish is estimated to be 9 months. It is our hope to have the Border Data Portal up and running by June 2016. The costs for the project include Foundation Center project management, defining data sets, translation of data sets from English to Spanish, application build-out, educational outreach, post-launch, and first-year maintenance. The combined total cost for the Border Data Portal is $125,510. The benefits are numerous and the potential is exponential. The U.S. Mexico Border Data Portal will increase the availability, accuracy, and transparency of information regarding the philanthropic sector in Mexico and the U.S. Mexico border region. It will also identify trends in donations and donor institutions in order to improve our understanding of resource distribution in Mexico and the border region. Finally, it will inform grant making, grant seeking, and policy formation. We thank you for your interest in this project and invite you to collaborate with us as a funding partner. We will be in communication with you to explore collaboration opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Amanda, and the Foundation Center, and thanks to all participants for attending today's presentation.